I've always loved the Appalachians. There's something about the way the mist hangs between the ridge lines in the early morning, how the trees seem to breathe with you when the wind moves through them. People back home think it's weird that I come here alone, that I spend nights miles from the nearest road with nothing but a tent, a headlamp, and the sound of the forest for company. They say these mountains have stories, whispers about things that live deeper in the woods than people were meant to go. I don't really get it. To me, it's peaceful. I come out here to get away from the hum of the highway, the endless glow of street lights. Out here, it's just the earth and air and water, the real stuff, not the imitations we've built around ourselves. One of the coolest facts about this place is that they used to be connected to the Highlands of Scotland. You know, back when Pangaea was a thing. They're just that old. I started this hike 3 days ago, following an old trail that doesn't show up on maps anymore. The ranger at the station frowned when I mentioned it, said the path wasn't maintained, that it wasn't recommended. He wouldn't look me in the eye when he said that. I figured he was just being cautious. Too many weekend hikers getting lost because they didn't pack a compass or thought a GPS would work out there. Though I'll admit, today something doesn't feel quite right. Can't quite put my finger on it. The forest looks the same. The endless canopy. The same peaceful quiet, except for the wildlife. Still, I can't help but think it's peaceful. I've always liked coming out here alone. There's a kind of quiet in these mountains that you can't find anywhere else. Not the dead quiet of an empty room, but something alive. Every breeze carries scent of moss and pine. Every sound feels older than memory, which I suppose makes sense when you think about where you are. I know people say this place makes them uneasy, that the silence feels heavy or that the woods have a way of watching you. I've never really felt that. To me, it's perfect. The stillness, the way sunlight filters through the leaves like gold dust, the low hum of insects and distant water babbling. It's the best kind of music. I come out here to remind myself what the world sounds like when it isn't trying to sell me something. Out here, time stretches. You breathe deeper without meaning to. There's a saying that refers to wilderness spots like this that I completely agree with. Out here, you can breathe with both lungs. I passed a few hikers on my way up this morning, and each one gave me that look, the half smile that says, better you than me. Maybe they see something I don't. But standing here, surrounded by green so thick it swallows the horizon, I can't imagine being anywhere else. It was sometime afternoon when I first heard something. The sound of something heavy moving through the trees just off the trail. Not the usual scatter of a squirrel or a lazy shuffle of a raccoon. It seemed to come out of nowhere. A sudden crashing through the trees to my left, fast and heavy, like something tearing downhill at full speed. I froze, obviously, eyes on the undergrowth, waiting for whatever it was to burst out onto the trail. Nothing did. The noise cut off as quickly as it had started, leaving only the ringing silence of the forest behind it. For a second my pulse was in my throat. Then I laughed, a short, shaky sound. Probably a deer spooked by me coming up the trail too quietly. Or a bear, maybe. They move faster than you think for something that big. I reached down and brushed my fingers against the can of bear spray clipped to my strap, just to remind myself it was there. Truth is, the bears around here are more scared of people than we are of them. I learned that the hard way a few years back. Came around a boulder on an old service road and nearly ran face first into a black bear the size of 4 football players. For a split second we both froze. Then it made this startled grunt, spun around, and shot straight up a tree like it weighed nothing. I remember standing there laughing, watching it peer down at me from 30 feet up, pretending it hadn't just fled for its life. So I told myself this was the same thing. Just an animal that didn't want to be seen. Though after I thought about it for a little while, I did notice something strange. The sound of the crashing through the woods didn't get fainter. It stayed around the same. It sounded almost like it wasn't running away, but running parallel to me. After the noise had faded and the forest settled again, I decided to push on. My plan was to make it down to the road before sunset. There's an old diner marked on my map about 5 miles east, and I figured a hot meal would be a nice break from trail mix and dehydrated stew. The path down was steep in places, winding through switchbacks lined with ferns and thick rhododendron. It took me close to 4 hours, but it was worth every step. The day had opened up beautifully. Sunlight slanted through the canopy in long, soft columns, turning the air gold where it caught the drifting pollen. The smell of earth and wildflowers mixed with that faint, sweet tang of pine sap warming on the bark. The only sound for miles was that rhythmic scuff of my boots and the chatter of birds. They were everywhere. Warblers darting through the low branches, woodpeckers hammering somewhere deep in the trees, and once a brilliant blue jay that swooped across the path ahead of me like a flash of sky coming loose. I stopped a few times just to listen. Out here, even silence has texture. You start to notice how alive it is. At one point, a raven passed overhead, its wings cutting a clean line against the sky. I watched it circle for a moment, coasting on the air like it owned the whole mountain. I'd read somewhere that ravens are among the smartest animals on Earth. They recognize faces, solve problems, even remember people who have been kind to them. There's evidence of them teaming up with predators, calling out to wolves or coyotes to show them where prey is, then sharing in the spoils after the hunt, or using the bigger predator's teeth to cut open a carcass of an animal that's already died, while also having the added benefit of keeping away eagles and other predators that might chase away the raven. I saw this on a documentary on Yellowstone. It was really cool. I've even heard they can mimic human voices, kind of like a parrot, though I've never met one that tried, not in the wild at least. Funny what nature figures out when you're not paying attention. For a while I just got lost in my surroundings. My legs ached, but in that good, clean way that means you've earned your rest. Somewhere ahead, I could hear the road, and eventually I could almost smell the diner. Bacon grease and coffee drifting up the hillside in my imagination. By the time I reached the road, the sun had started to dip behind the ridges, throwing long blue shadows across the pavement. The diner wasn't much to look at, a squat, sun-faded building with a buzzing neon sign that just said "Eats." The smell hit me before I got even closer to the door. The kind of smell that tells you it's probably not the most sanitary, but by God is it delicious. The scent that could make a man forgive any number of his sins. Inside the place was alive in that slow, easy way mountain diners get toward evening. A couple of locals sat at the counter nursing mugs of coffee. A waitress hummed along to a song from the radio. And somewhere in the back a grill hissed like rain. I slid into a booth near the window, ordered a burger and a slice of pie, and just let myself enjoy being around people again. Not long after, a man in a camo jacket and an orange cap took a seat across from me with a nod. He had that weathered, sunburned look of someone who just spends most of his life outdoors. "You out here hunting?" he asked, his voice a gravelly drawl softened by friendliness. I shook my head. "Nah, just hiking. I hunt back home though, mostly invasive deer though. Trying to help keep the balance, you know." That got a grin out of him. He gave me a solid clap on the back that nearly knocked the air from my lungs. "Well, thank you for your service," he said, half joking, but with that undercurrent of genuine respect. "Those deer will eat those forest bear if we don't keep track of them." I chuckled and asked, "What about you? What do you go after? Deer, hogs, maybe bear?" He snorted and shook his head. There, sure enough. Hogs if they're tearing up the ground bad enough. Not bear. He leaned back and took a sip from his coffee mug, eyes flicking toward the window as if one might be passing by right then. Ain't right, eating another predator. Don't make no sense. They got them worms in them that make your brain funny. No thanks. I stick to things with hooves, feathers, or scales. That's enough meat for me. He leaned in close then, a grave seriousness on his face, as he said almost in a whisper, "Oh, and there's one more most important thing about not hunting bear. The best reason." He looked around as if it was a secret that he needed to keep just between me and him. "They're just too damn cute to shoot." We both laughed at that, and I nodded, smiling. Hard to argue with that. We talked for a while longer, about the trails, the fishing up north, and the weather rolling in from the west. It felt good, easy, the kind of conversation you can only have in a place where everyone knows the land, where talk of trees and rivers carries more weight than politics or the price of gas. When my food came, the hunter raised his coffee in a small salute, a universal sign of saying, "Right, I've had enough, I'm going." But before he did, he leaned his elbows on the table and nodded towards my folded map. "So, where are you headed from here?" I spread it out between the ketchup bottle and the napkin holder, tracing a finger along a faint green line that wound back up toward the higher ridge. Thinking about taking this trail here, quit through the back country for a couple of days before looping east. I figured I'd make camp near the ridgeline tonight. He squinted at the map, then frowned a little, the deep lines in his face folding in on themselves. "You're talking about the old Elk River path?" I nodded. "That's the one." He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head slowly. "Wouldn't do that if I were you. Trail a few miles closer to the road will get you to the same place, and you won't be missing much but trouble." That caught my attention. "Trouble?" I asked, half grinning. "Like bad terrain, or—" He looked down at his coffee for a long moment before answering. "Nah, just not right up that way." When I didn't say anything, he sighed and went on. "Hard to explain. Just a feeling you get. Woods are thick up there, real old. Some of the boys I hunt with say they heard things. Voices, screams, laughing, shadows moving where they shouldn't. You know how folks get talking, but still." He paused again, jaw tightening. "Only thing I ever had happen up there myself was one time, late season, I'm tracking sign near one of the old fire roads. Real quiet, middle of the day. Then I hear this little voice behind me. That kid couldn't be more than 6 or 7, asking me how to get home." He gave a short, humorless laugh and rubbed the back of his neck. "Thought maybe family got turned around, so I called out, told him to stay put, and started walking that way. But the voice kept moving, always just far enough ahead I couldn't see nothing. After about 50 yards, the woods went dead still. Not even a bird. I turned around, and I swear it was like the trail had shifted behind me. Took me half an hour to find my bearings again." The hunter's eyes had gone a little distant, staring past me at something that wasn't there. He gave a small shudder and forced a grin. "Anyway, best to stay clear of that ridge. Some places just don't want you hanging around. Stick closer to the road. You'll still get your view, and you'll sleep easier." He pushed his chair back then, dropped a few bills on the table, and clapped me on the shoulder again. "Good talking to you, friend. Enjoy your hike. Just, pick your path careful." The bell over the door jingled as he left, the last bit of daylight spilling across the floor before the door swung shut. For a moment I just sat there, listening to the low hum of the diner. The coffee machine hissed. Someone laughed at the counter. Everything felt normal again. Still, when I folded the map up, I found myself tracing the other trail one more time. The one he told me to avoid. I sat there for a long time after the hunter left, stirring what was left of my coffee. His story kept turning over in my head, the part about the kid's voice especially. I'd heard my fair share of campfire tales over the years, and most of them start with someone saying, "I can't explain it." Out here, the woods play tricks. Sound carries weirdly. Echoes bounce around in ways that make you swear someone's walking right beside you. Still, something about the way he'd said it, quiet, matter of fact, stuck with me. I told myself it was just another mountain story. Every range has them. I've been hiking the Appalachians for years, often alone, and never had anything truly strange happen. The worst I ran into was weather that turned faster than expected, or a raccoon bold enough to unzip my food bag in the night. Nothing you couldn't laugh about later. Well, almost nothing. There was one time about 2 summers back, when I was changing into dry clothes near camp and thought I heard someone shout. Not close, but not far either. The kind of sound that's half swallowed by the wind. Half dressed, I kept listening. The woods went still, then nothing. No echo, no second call. I remember waiting for a good minute, thinking maybe another hiker was around, but it never came again, so I figured it was just the wind in the hollows. On another trip, I'd heard the sound of a mountain lion's cry somewhere off the ridge. The sound made my skin crawl. That long, drawn-out scream that sounds almost human. I'd heard recordings before. I knew what it was. But this one, it went on for far too long. 30 seconds, maybe more. Unbroken. No breath, no pause. Just that raw, wailing note that seemed to hang in the air. When it finally stopped, I remember checking my watch just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. But after a while, the night settled back down, and I figured it maybe had just echoed strange between the peaks. Thinking back on those things right now, I realized none of them had ever led to anything. Nothing had followed me. Nothing had gone wrong. The hunter's story was just that. A story. These mountains are old, and old places carry noises, memories, and fears we build into them. So when I left the diner, the choice felt easy. I folded the map and slipped it back into my pack, deciding to stick with the route I'd planned all along, the same one the hunter warned me off. Maybe I'm just being stubborn, or maybe I just don't like letting other people's ghosts steer me. Before stepping onto the trailhead, I gave the can of bear spray on my strap a reassuring tap, a little ritual I've picked up over the years. I remember that at here, you prepare for the real dangers, not imagined ones. The evening had cooled. The sky above the trees deepened into that pale blue that comes before twilight. The forest waited, still and quiet, and so I continued. The road fell away behind me as I started up the trail again, the last bit of daylight fading fast. The path wound upward through the long stretches of switchbacks and open slopes where the trees thinned just enough for the sky to show through. The air had cooled, carrying that damp, earthy smell that only comes after sundown. The sweet smell of decaying leaves and moss. As I climbed, the forest began to change around me. The daytime birds quieted one by one, their songs giving way to the layered hum of the night. Crickets started first, their rhythms steady and slow. Then came the frogs, distant, uneven calls from somewhere down near the creeks below. Every so often, an owl's low hoot rolled through the dark like a stone skipping across water. It was the kind of quiet you could listen to for hours, where even the small sounds felt deliberate. By the time I reached the upper ridge, the sky had deepened to a dark indigo, the stars just beginning to blink through. I clicked on my headlamp, the beam cutting a clean white path through the trees. The circle of light moved across the trail, catching glints of dew on ferns and pale bark of birch trunks. My breath came in slow, soft clouds. Colder up here. I was just starting to think about how close I must be to my campsite when it happened. A sharp crash to my left, maybe 20 feet off the trail. Branches snapping, leaves thrashing, something fast again. The beam of my light jerked towards the noise, searching the undergrowth. There's nothing there. But all the sounds of the night had stopped. Every cricket, every frog, every owl. Gone in an instant, like someone had pulled the plug on the world. I could hear my pulse in my ears, my breath shallow. I waited, muscles locked, not wanting to move. The seconds dragged. The silence stretched so thin it felt like it would tear. But then just as suddenly the forest exhaled. Everything started back up again. Tentative at first, then confident. The crickets, then the frogs joining in. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding and forced a small laugh. Probably a deer, I muttered to myself, though my voice sounded too loud in the darkness. I pushed on, keeping my light steady and my pace deliberate. It took another half hour to reach the clearing near the ridge where I'd planned to camp. The moon was high enough now that its light spilled silver across the trees, bright enough that I switched off my lamp and let my eyes adjust. The whole forest glowed faintly, every branch edged in soft blue light, the kind of scene that makes you forget how far from the world you are. Setting up the camp in the dark isn't ideal, but I've done it enough to make it second nature. I unpacked the tent, staked the corners, checked the lines, all by the clean light of the moon. It was quiet again. Not the eerie kind of quiet from before, just the steady stillness of the mountains at night. Just as I was rolling out my sleep bag, I heard it again. A faint scurrying in the trees behind me. Not big, but quick. Maybe a raccoon, or something smaller. I paused, listening again. It stopped after a few seconds, then started again, this time a little farther off, like whatever it was had lost interest. I shook my head and smiled. "You picked the wrong tent to mess with tonight," I said softly, half amused. Still, I kept the bear spray close at hand as I crawled into my sleeping bag, the moonlight painting pale shapes across the tent walls. I must have dozed off some time after midnight. The forest had gone still outside. Just a soft hiss of the wind moving through the trees and the occasional rustle of something small in the leaves. I remember rolling onto my side, half dreaming about home, when a voice tore through the dark.
"It's here!"
I jerked upright, heart hammering, words still hanging in the cold air. I thought I'd dreamed it for a second. Then it came again, farther off but still clear.
"It's here! Come on, hurry up!"
I scrambled out of the tent, fumbling with the zipper, the night air biting at my skin. The ridge below was swallowed in darkness, only a faint gleam of moonlight tracing the tops of the trees. The voices came from just over the slope. Several of them now, shouting back and forth.
"In the cave! In the cave!"
They sounded like men, deep, urgent, but something was wrong. The tone was off, hollow somehow, like it was coming through a radio, with the tuning just slightly off. Each word stretched too long, the edges fraying in a way that made my skin crawl. My first thought was hunters, maybe a group running dogs, got turned around. But who hunts this late? And who yells like that in the middle of the night, loud enough to wake the whole ridge? I crouched low beside my tent, listening. The voices carried again, broken by the wind.
"It's here! It's here!"
Then a pause. long enough that I started to think it was over, before a new sound rose from the trees. The low, throaty croak of a raven. Familiar, ordinary. I felt the tension start to slip from my shoulders. I looked up to where the sound was coming from, one of the trees near the ridge. A raven sat on a branch just a few feet above me, its feathers catching the moonlight like oil on the water, its head tilted slightly, one glossy black eye fixed on mine. Then, clear as a bell, and wrong in every possible way, it called out.
Bullets don't work!
The words were sharp, clipped, human words but flattened, like they'd been learned by repetition rather than understanding. Another voice answered from somewhere in the trees beyond.
Not human!
Another.
Not a deer!
And then a cacophony of them.
In the cave! Here! In the cave! Not a deer! It's here! Bullets don't work! Not human! In the cave! In the cave!
Every hair on my body stood on end. The air felt electric, the forest suddenly alive in a way that was all teeth and shadows. I didn't move. The raven's eyes gleamed down at me unblinking, and in that moment I realized they weren't just repeating what they'd heard. These calls had to serve some sort of purpose. A sudden rustle caught my attention, just at the edge of the tree line below the ridge. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. Through the dim moonlight I saw a shadow moving, low at first, then rising, looking up toward the ravens as they continued to squawk and call their strange human-like words. I fumbled with my headlamp, the beam slicing through the darkness, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The light landed on the shadow, and I felt a surge of relief. A deer, like so many I'd passed on the trails before. A little too big to be comfortable, maybe, but nothing I couldn't handle. But then I noticed it. The deer was 30 feet up in a pine, its hooves gripping the bark like claws, its body balanced impossibly on the trunk. It stared right at me, unblinking. The moonlight glinted in its eyes, and in that reflection I realized it wasn't a deer. Not entirely. The shape was wrong, the posture too deliberate. The way it hung there, almost like it had climbed purposely rather than leapt. My breath caught. I almost let out a nervous laugh, until it shifted its head and its gaze locked onto mine. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to bolt, but my legs refused. I could only stare back, heart hammering in my chest as the impossible unfolded. Then, without warning, its head plunged down the trunk. The sound of snapping bark and scraping hooves made me flinch violently. My light followed it, but there was nothing to see, only the deep shadows of the pine and the tree line beyond. But then the sound found my ears. A wet, heavy scraping sound climbing, fast. Somewhere between the thud of hooves and the rending bark, it was coming up the ridge, toward me. I stumbled a step back, the world narrowing to the sound and the frozen impossibility of what I had just seen. My fingers gripped the bear spray, knuckles white, but my mind was already racing, trying to understand what could climb like that, and why it had chosen now that the voices and the ravens had pinned me in place, rather than face what was coming up that ridge and test whether the bear spray would work. I just ran. Tent, pack, everything. I left it all behind. My light was clutched in my hand, my only anchor in the darkness, swinging wildly as I barreled down the ridge. Behind me the voices rose again, frantic and disjointed, coming from everywhere at once. I could hear the raven calls cutting through them, sharp and mocking like guides herding that impossible thing towards me. I skidded over fallen logs, ducked under low-hanging branches, pounding down the steep slopes as fast as my legs could carry me. My lungs burned, my heart felt like it would tear from my chest, but I didn't stop. Something in the woods was gaining. That wet, scraping sound that made my stomach twist, and I could hear it close in for a moment before it vanished, lost as I leapt over a narrow creek. The trail seemed endless. For what felt like hours, I ran through the dark forest, the intermittent voices chasing me, then fading, then reappearing closer. My legs ached, my muscles screamed, and I still ran, driven by a mix of fear and pure adrenaline. Finally, the trees thinned. The forest gave way to the old service road I had passed earlier. My chest heaving, my clothes drenched in sweat, I stumbled onto the asphalt, still clutching the flashlight. The world was quiet. The forest noises, the voices, even the ravens. Everything had stopped. I leaned against the guardrail, trying to catch my breath, the adrenaline slowly leaking out of me in shaky, uneven gasps. Darkness stretched out in every direction. I was alone, completely and utterly alone. Minutes passed, though it could have been longer. Then, up the road, I saw the faint glow of headlights. A car moving slow, engine humming. I waved frantically, stumbling into the road as it rolled to a stop. The driver leaned over, concerned. I didn't wait to calm down. I spilled everything, the voices, the ravens, the deer climbing the pine, words tumbling out faster than I could organize them. The driver just listened, eyes wide but calm, nodding as I rattled on. When I finally stopped, my chest heaving, the man said nothing except hop in. I climbed into the car, trembling, glancing back once at the dark forest behind us. Nothing moved, and nothing called. The mountains loomed quietly, as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I don't know what it was that chased me. I'm not sure I want to know. All I do know is that the next time I come here, if I do, I won't just be bringing bear spray.